Hi everyone, Libros here, and welcome back to the show. This episode is brought to you by Riverside, an all-in-one recording and editing platform created for creators and podcasters like myself. Like, quite literally, without Riverside, I would not be able to bring to you the podcast and episodes every week, as this is the platform that I use to connect with guests and record episodes. It's such an amazing tool that has saved me so much time to produce episodes and bring them to you with an easy to use online studio and suite of AI tools where you can create clips for social media and so much more. If you are a fellow creator or podcaster like myself and would like to check out Rivers, then head to the link in the show notes of this episode where you can get 15% off your subscription. And please let me know how you get on using the platform. I would love to hear your experience using Riverside. As I said, it's been a game changer for me in bringing to you these episodes every week. Now, in terms of episodes, in this episode, I am joined by Devin Mattoon, who is a certified healer, guide, and consciousness facilitator. In this episode, we focus on grounding. We explore what grounding is, the many different grounding methodologies and practices that are available to us, and some of the science behind grounding and how grounding can help us to heal and ultimately show up as our best selves. So if you would like to learn more about grounding and the many different practices that are available to you to help with healing and becoming your best version of yourself and connecting with nature and becoming more of who you truly are and all this great stuff, then this episode is for you. So let's hop on over into my conversation with Devin and explore the topic of grounding. Devin, welcome to Raising Consciousness. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today on the topic of grounding. But before we dive into that, we'd love for you to share a little bit more about yourself and who you are for those who are listening in today or watching, wherever they're tuning in from, who might not be familiar with you or your work.
Sure. Yep. If any of you know me, thank you so much for tuning in. Luke is awesome and so gracious for me to attend on his podcast, Raising Consciousness. I'm super excited to be here. For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Devin. I am a spiritual awakening coach. I am also certified in guiding meditation and breath of life energy healing. So I'm a coach and a healer.
Spirituality and meditation and all of these different practices that we're going to talk about today in relation to grounding start.
Spirituality has always been something that I'm interested in. I like to tell people that my entire life was preparing me for my spiritual awakening, which happened in 2020. So that big event kind of opened my eyes deeper to the world of spirituality and really got me interested in starting these practices. For as long as I can remember, I wanted to start learning how to meditate and start learning how to read tarot and all of these things, and I just never got to it. And 2020 was when that really opened up for me.
You've mentioned your spiritual awakening. For those who might not be familiar what a spiritual awakening is, let's start there. Like, what's a spiritual awakening and what was your awakening that led you to everything that's happened since?
Gotcha. Yeah. Spiritual awakening, it's got a lot of different definitions. A lot of people view it differently and define that differently. I see it as the coming of consciousness. So all of these things that are unconscious, maybe you weren't recognizing before or not seeing, coming conscious in your world and in your life. And that can happen in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's with your health. Some people will have really big health scares and realize that they need to make changes in their life. It could come with like conspiracy theories or things that, you didn't see before and now you see now, right? The unconscious coming conscious. For me, it was really just a myriad of habits and beliefs and things that, I didn't realize, like I was doing this unconsciously. I didn't realize that I had these habits. And what really sparked that for me is around the year 2020, right? I graduated college with degrees in computer science and mathematics, but at that time we had stopped meeting in person. I had an internship that ended, so I lost my job. I had an apartment that I was going to renew that my apartment manager decided not to renew, so I was losing my home. I just started a brand new relationship, and decided to move in with him so that I wasn't homeless, and I ended a toxic relationship before that. So it was really a lot of just big major changes in my life that I was like, okay, maybe I need to look at things a little bit differently.
From your experience, how does one know if they're going through an awakening experience?
Yeah, so there are a lot of common symptoms. One of them, I'd say the most one, feeling like you're going crazy, feeling like you're seeing things that like not everybody else is seeing. It can come with changes in appetite. It can come with losing connection with your friends and family, kind of feeling like you don't really belong anymore, that you're starting to think differently. So it could be a change in your belief systems, your physical world literally crumbling, like things just being taken away left and right. Um, Probably a few other things that I'm not remembering at the moment, but there's a lot of different ways that it can manifest in your life.
And if someone on the other end of this relates to that, and it's that difficult time, there's another saying. I think it's similar to like a spiritual awakening experience, like the dark night of the soul type of experience as well. I've kind of heard in some kind of quarters of the spiritual community and stuff. So yeah, it can be challenging. 100%. What would your words of wisdom be to someone who relates to that right now and is going through that? If they think they're going crazy, like what would you say to them?
Sure. I mean, especially in that depression, anxiety, that dark night of the soul state where everything feels like it's crushing and you're kind of like, it can feel like you're dying, literally, like your identity or who you used to be is dying and you're becoming a new person. So what I really recommend for those people, seek out a mentor. It's super, super helpful to have somebody in your corner who knows what's going on, somebody that you trust and resonate with in the spiritual space. You could also do a lot of things on your own. So I journaled was a huge one for me, journaling and keeping your own spiritual practice. So pick something, anything that resonates with you. It doesn't really matter what it is. I had a friend that tarot was her thing, that she just dive right into that. You can do meditation. A grounding practice is super, super helpful. Um, and just keep it simple. Try not to learn everything all at once, because I know that's really easy to want to do.
Maybe I should have asked this beforehand, but what does spirituality mean to you?
Mm. So I'd say spirituality to me means the connection with something bigger than yourself. So I believe in the 12 laws of the universe, one of which being that we are all one. We're all one consciousness. We're all connected to one being. We're all connected to each other. Um, and and I believe in that now. I didn't used to believe in that. I mean, I believed in something, but I didn't really know what. And now I kind of feel like I believe in a higher source. I call it the universe. You can call it whatever you want. A lot of people resonate with the word God. I call it the universe or source, and something just bigger than yourself.
Yeah, and so that brings us on to what we wanted to dive a lot more deeper into today in terms of grounding, because I think there's like a symbiotic relationship between when we're maybe even going through that spiritual awakening experience, coming in touch with more of our spiritual side. Like obviously we will have, but some of us ignore or play down that we don't have. So in terms of grounding, from your perspective, like what's the relationship between grounding and spirituality? And when we talk about grounding, like what we're actually talking about here?
Okay, so I looked up the definition of grounding and I really couldn't find a singular, concise definition for grounding, or, what I looked up, it wasn't really what I was looking for. So the one that I found that was most encompassing of what I think when I think of grounding is balancing out the spiritual and physical energy in your body by connecting yourself with the earth. And a lot of people think that that's earthing. So when a lot of people think grounding, they think going outside and putting your feet in the earth. And when I think of grounding, there are a lot of other things that are grounding practice. And then what I call connecting to the earth would be earthing specifically.
Yeah, and so if we kind of like dive deeper, like why do you feel like some sort of grounding practice, whether that is earthing, because that's actually the what's the word I'm looking for? Not quite sure, but like I guess the relationship that I have when I hear grounding, my mind immediately goes to like, as you said, like touching the earth in some way. That's obviously the practice of earthing. But so my question is, why do you feel like some sort of grounding practice helps us to become more one with ourselves, and it is, I guess, has that relationship with spirituality?
Yeah. So I mean, to me, I use grounding in times where I'm feeling really overwhelmed or stressed out or depressed or feeling that disconnection from myself. So going outside and just feeling that connection again has always been super beneficial to me, whether it is actually going outside or doing some other practice in order to ground. It's a way to like reset your body's state. So if you're in a sympathetic state, something like anxious, you're in fight or flight, to do a grounding practice brings you back into that parasympathetic state of like calm and clarity, and you can approach the situation differently.
And what does your grounding practices or routines look like? Because as you mentioned, grounding can be not just earthing. So what are some of your go-tos, and how does that look like in a standard daily routine for Devin?
Gotcha. So depending on what's available to me at the time, obviously going outside and putting my feet in the earth is a big one. I try to do that at least at some point every day. But, I live in the Midwest, so that's not always possible when it's freezing and there's snow on the ground outside. So there are some other things that I will do. A warm drink or a warm, like nourishing meal is always really, really grounding and super good for your body. I use breath work a lot. You can reconnect with your senses. So, just like picking out things that you can feel, touch, smell, taste, all of that, reconnecting with your senses. You can hold a pet or cuddle with your loved one or hug one of your family members. You can go through and scan your body and just like go down and start feeling every single area of your body that can bring you back down to a grounded state. Meditation is a big one that a lot of people use, journaling too. Um, you can exercise. I like that one when things are a little more chaotic and I feel like things are out of control. And exercise is a really, really good one for that. Connecting with water, stretching. You can hum or sing anything that's, I don't want to say mindless because it is very mindful, the things that you're doing, but it's disconnecting you from the things that are stressing you out or making you anxious and coming back into your body.
Yeah, I like the body scan one. It's something that I probably need to look at myself and do more of. But from my experience as well, kind of on that, I found at times you can combine them as well, right? So I could do a meditation practice, but actually merge that with a body scan, um, or I could, go out and earth, but then also meditate at the same time. So you're getting the benefits of the earthing practice, but also of the meditation as well. Is that something that you do? Is to combine these different methodologies into one because
Well,
like, they have different benefits?
of course. Yeah. I mean, there are things that naturally go together, things that you can practice in conjunction with each other. I like to pick a few to practice on a regular basis. It's not always the same and it's not always in the same order. I don't do it as like a routine, but more use it as a tool for like, ooh, like I'm feeling some things. I need to take a second for myself for after I'm off of a business call, for example, like to take that time and just connect back with the earth and with myself is really important.
Talk to us about that. Talk to us about the mindset of seeing these practices as a tool. And I want to go there because for my own life, so I'm a naturally curious person, I guess. And, when I explore these spiritual practices, grounding practices, but even self-improvement practices, right? There's a lot of different methodologies, right, and tools. And I think sometimes people can get kind of overwhelmed. What I gotta do breath work every day. I gotta meditate. I've come across like more or advanced kind practices like qigong, kind of all these other different methodologies as well. It's like, okay, shit, like how do I fit all these into my day? Because I want to practice all of them. They have different benefits, and yeah, I want to experience them all as well. So for someone who could relate to that and they're discovering these different practices, seeing them as a tool, I think is a great mindset. Yeah, like from your experience, like talk to us about that and how people can maybe not get overwhelmed with kind of all of them, how they pick the one that's for them. Is it about having them in their toolbox and then picking the right, well, not the right one, but picking the one they feel they need at any given moment? I'm curious of like that mindset, seeing them as a tool rather than a rigid routine that they have to do every second of like every day at a certain time for this duration. Basically the message that I think that people can take from when they're learning about everything we're talking about today?
Sure. Yeah. And what I really like about these practices is, yes, I see them as spiritual practices, but I mean, they have practical applications. They're self development practices. Anybody can do these, even if you don't identify as spiritual, which I really like. Breathwork is a big one that people are kind of scared of or think it's more than it is. And it's just connecting back with your breath. I mean, there are some pretty simple breathwork practices that you can do. There's a couple that I want to talk about. But before I do that, just looking at these things as a tool. So there are different times where we need different things. And I've gotten really good at practicing asking myself knowing what my body needs in that moment. So if I'm feeling overwhelmed versus frustrated versus anxious versus disconnected, I kind of now I know what those things feel like and know which tools to use in certain situations. So I wouldn't say that any one tool is necessarily better than any other tool, even when you're feeling certain things. It's really a personal practice. It's something that's deeply personal to you. I would say instead of trying to start with everything all at once, pick one or two things that really resonate with you, right? That really, if you like writing, pick up journaling. That's a natural transition, something that's already going to be connected with you. If you don't feel connected with meditating, don't meditate. Like you don't have to. You don't have to use any certain one of these tools. You get to figure out which ones you enjoy the most and which ones are going to benefit you in your life the best. I like grounding and journaling and meditating, but I still don't meditate every day. It's not something that I do all the time. I use it as a tool, and I'm, consistently increasing the time in which I meditate. But you don't have to. You don't have to do it every day.
How did you develop that self-awareness of like when you know, okay, I'm feeling A, B, and C right now. Okay, I'm gonna go to that tool. Like how do people develop that kind of relationship with self? I think it's a process, but I'm curious, like from your experience, like how you was able to get to that place.
Yeah, it is a process. It was definitely a series of practices and a lot of just trial and error for me. But I think the biggest thing that I connect with now is listening to my intuition or listening to my body's little signals. So your body already knows what to do. When you need something, your body knows what it needs and knows what to do. And it's just a matter of listening to that. So taking a minute and just sitting in silence or asking yourself, like, what do I need right now? And it might feel quiet or feel small, like a small nudge. And those nudges can get bigger and more clear as you practice listening and following those communications that you get from your body. So now I don't really need to consciously ask myself, okay, what do I need? I just go into, ooh, like I think I need to go outside. Like I need to ground right now, or oh, like I've got a lot of emotions or feelings coming up that I don't really understand. I'm going to journal and help, dig deeper into those things.
Intuition, you mentioned it there. I feel like alongside intuition and just a lot of spiritual practices or just spirituality in of itself, I feel like one of the challenges that people might have with that, especially in the Western world, is that you can't measure it per se, right? Like we live in a world, I think, that is very much data driven. Like we're gonna make progress and measure and goals and kind of like all of these sort of uh, things and messages that kind of get passed on to us. But when it comes to spirituality, like it's something beyond time and space, right? Like intuition is the same. Like when people have a feeling like, ooh, is that my intuition or is that a thought that has produced a feeling and like now I'm feeling this way through a random thought that's kind of come to me. So what would you say to someone who kind of doesn't know or is just approaching kind of intuition and spirituality for the first time in terms of this and developing that relationship with self where they know like that's intuition, that isn't, like how do people develop that? I think it is developed personally. And I think because we live in that world where everything's so loud all the time, we've kind of lost that innate ability. Yeah, I would love to kind of go there in terms of that kind of relationship that I think a lot of people have with spirituality and why maybe it's kind of off-putting to them because it's kind of something that we can't measure and wanting to try like help people to understand that that better and those feelings and where those feelings are coming from. If that makes sense.
Yes. So I 100% believe that everybody has access to this and we all have that innate ability to do that, and that we've also been disconnected from it, consciously or unconsciously. It's something that's out of practice and something that then you can continue to practice and improve within yourself. And it gets to a point where it can be an unconscious practice again, right? It's just something that I do. It's not something that I'm consciously following. But one way I like to identify like intuition versus thought is like, can I explain it? Because if I can explain it, it's most likely a thought. It still can be intuition. But like those intuitive pulls, it's like a lot of them I can't explain. I can't explain why I need to do this, but I know deep into my core that I need to do this. And it could be like, I need to turn left or go a different way to work today. It's not something that you can explain, but I'm sure everybody has had some sort of experience where they have this like feeling. It could be like in a dangerous situation, like I need to get out of here. Like I need to go somewhere else. It's not safe here. And you might not be able to explain why, but you have this feeling. But it also could be like something little of, man, I feel like having something warm today for lunch instead of having like a salad like I normally do. It can be little things that just might be a change or something new or different that you're not used to doing or feeling, and you just have this pull, this urge of like, I think I should do this today.
Yeah, that's really helpful. The unexplainable. So it sounds like when it's intuition in most cases, it's feeling driven first, and then maybe we have the rational thought of like, actually, I need to do this, right? Whereas when it's our thoughts or the monkey mind or kind of mental chatter, like I've heard it referred to, like, those racing thoughts in our mind, it's those racing thoughts. So it's thought first, and then because thoughts produce feelings and emotions, it's kind of the reverse. That's kind of like how I'm understanding it. Would you go along with that, or see that differently?
Yeah, I could see why that would be a good connection, especially for somebody who doesn't necessarily know what the feeling is. That's a great place to start.
And also from my own exploration of, and I guess experience with intuition as well, I haven't necessarily found the words to describe what I'm going to try and about what I'm going to try to say. But basically, I kind of see intuition when we have that kind of like feeling is more driven from like an energy. Whereas I think that when we, maybe it's like thought first and then feeling and then emotion, it's like driven from more of an emotional place, if that makes sense. Like I think like when something's driven more from energy, like as was saying, maybe it's something that is pulling us towards somewhere. Yeah, when we're in like more of an emotional place or emotional state, it's mostly driven by thoughts. But yeah, they're just kind of my random thoughts to kind of add to the conversation on intuition. But I've kind of seen it as more like the intuition is driven by some sort of energy, and maybe that energy can't be explained, like as you're sharing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I like to think that like intuition lives in the body.
Mm.
You can feel it somewhere in your body, usually, instead of up in your mind.
Yeah, and then and that also goes along with a lot of because some people call intuition like your gut feelings and stuff, and yeah, I definitely feel like also intuition is in the body and not the mind. So hopefully that'll be helpful to people, and that intuition can help people to make the choices and the decisions on like when they need what tool, what grounding practice, in what moment. Do you have a favorite practice?
I would say journaling is one that's just close to my heart. I do it a lot, but I've gotten to like going outside a lot more. I sit outside in the morning, getting that sun early in the morning, or go putting my feet in the earth just for a few minutes, even if it's like getting out of your car before you go into your apartment. Just take off your shoes, put your feet in the earth. Those are, I would say, my two favorite at the moment.
What does Devin's journaling practice looks like?
So it's not one of those things that I do every day, but I have started to connect my journaling practice with just taking note of my menstrual cycle, where I'm at in my cycle. So I take note of the day that I'm at in my cycle and which phase that I'm in, and also what phase the moon is in. and what zodiac sign it is a part of at the moment. So I put that with the date along at the top of my journal, just to recognize any patterns that come up, like like I was in this phase of my cycle and having these feelings, like can I go back and see other things that were happening, or how similar it was, depending on those factors. So I do that as part of my journaling practice now. um, but it can really range. It just kind of depends on what I'm feeling. I use my journal as a notebook a lot, so I take notes of things that come up in my day, and I will do gratitude is a big one when I feel like I don't really know what to journal, but I need to journal. Just listing the things that I'm grateful for and appreciate in my life. Mostly as a tool, I use it to explore my emotions. If I'm feeling something that I don't quite understand, or I know there's something else beneath the surface, I'll just write about it. And there's something about taking pen to paper and actually expressing those things and digging deeper and asking yourself this question of, okay, why? Why am I feeling this way? Why did I act this way? Why did this person trigger me? Why, why?
And is that in a kind of standard notebook pads? So, because I'm asking because obviously you can get these very structured journals, right? But it sounds like a lot of your
Right.
practice is very much based on personalized, right? So personalizing it to you. And I think with so many things within, if it's within what we're talking about today, or just kind of health in general, because I kind of see a lot of this, well, spirit is kind of part of our overall kind of health. I come from a very holistic kind of perspective in terms of when it comes to health, so mind, body, soul, relationships, etc. It's all being connected, all affects our health. So within the health space, I'm kind of learning more and more and more, or it's becoming more evident that actually all of it, to be honest, is to have a personalized approach. And it seems like with your journal practice, that's also something that you do, is to personalize it for what you need it for. So, yeah, do you journal on just like your standard kind of notebook that anyone can pick up from the shop?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I have it. Here's my journal, my current journal. Um, this one was actually gifted to me, but I have probably way too many journals that are empty, or I use for certain things or specific things. But you don't need any certain tool. You don't need anything special. It doesn't even need to be bound. You could just write on a piece of paper. It doesn't It's whatever is going to work for you. I personally like a pretty journal. I like to use that and make that a part of my life. It makes it more exciting, more personal. But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, everybody's so unique and so individualized that it's important for you to decide those things for yourself. What is important to you? Is a pretty journal important to you? Is that going to encourage you to do that practice more, or could you not really care less about that, and you have an old spiral notebook that you used to use in school and you want to use that? Like, that's totally fine. You can do that.
Yeah, definitely. But even like personalizing it in terms of what you've done, in terms of, I'm sure like every day when you go to your journal, or when you journal as well, because you said you don't necessarily do it every day. Um, it sounds like there's not necessarily structure to it. And I think we live in such of a world where like we believe like everything needs to be structured and kind of routines. I've seen kind of some journal practices where like 5 minutes you do this, 10 minutes you write about this or something. But it sounds like your practice is personalized, but also like where you might have that time set, like I'm going to journal at this time, but then actually what the details of what that looks like is dependent on the moment. Has your practices like always been like that? Has that always been kind of how you've approached things?
I would say not always. There definitely have been times where I'm like, oh, I need to, have this structured practice. I want to do this, 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 and this every single day. But I've noticed that doesn't really work for me. It doesn't ever usually stick very well. Sometimes I need different things. And I would say almost every day I need different things. So being able to have that flexibility is really important to me. Like, knowing that the tools are there and knowing how to use them is one thing, but then like forcing yourself to do a certain thing every single day, it might not be what you need. So having that little bit of flexibility it's important to me personally. But I also understand people who like routine and structure. Like, if you want routine and structure and you want to do this, 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 and this every day, and that works for you, I'm here for that.
Yeah, there's this kind of theme that's coming up for a lot of conversations that I'm having of how we live very much in like an extreme world, right? Where it's like either one or the other. So in this context, it might be like, very structured or like the least structured, for example. And I also think like it's not as black or white as either. There's like this kind of you can sit anywhere across that paradigm ultimately with many things as well. And I had a guest on, and I was talking to someone who kind of shared this idea of maybe in the calendar, you have that time to journal, to exercise, but then actually the details of what that looks like in that hour block or in that half an hour block is actually dependent on what you need in that time period. And I like that concept of, because it merges actually the two ideas of having routine or wanting to do the habit, because sometimes when we have habits we get caught up in maybe other stuff, and we're not doing the habits that we actually want to do, or the routines that are going to help us be our best selves, but also leave that open for what we need in the moment. And that was a good idea that kind of got brought forward that I thought would be valuable, right? Like, so we're not getting caught up in the busyness of life, and then come the end of the day think, I wanted to read today, or I wanted to journal today, I didn't get my movement in today. Where if you kind of have that block, and then the details of what that looks like, depending on kind of what you feel you need. So, yeah, do you have any thoughts or kind of ideas to kind of add to that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to, even if, you're not blocking off time for a certain thing, just blocking off you time. Like, it doesn't even have to be super specific, just like, this is me time. This is time that it could be right before bed, decompressing before you go to sleep, or right in the morning when you get up, or on a lunch break, or between client calls, or, whatever it is. I definitely see the value in just taking a certain amount of time and like blocking that off of like, okay, this is time for me. And if you have something specific that you want to do during that time, like movement or journaling, like obviously go ahead and do that. Or you can leave it open too. It could be adventure time or forest time or, anything that you might need in that.
Go back to grounding. What are the benefits? So, what are the benefits that you've seen from having these grounding practices? What can people expect when they start to incorporate them into their daily routine?
Okay, so between like personal and actual studies that have been done, there are indications that grounding can reduce inflammation, it can improve your sleep, it can help manage pain, it can help improve your mood, it can help regulate your immunity, it can help heal your wounds faster, it can help you manage your stress. It can improve heart health, cortisol rhythm, blood flow. It can increase your energy, and it can decrease stress and anxiety. So I personally have felt a lot of those. I typically will do it when I'm feeling like really overwhelmed and stressed out, and I see an almost immediate difference.
So a lot of benefits, lots of reasons for people to get started. Go back to that. So talk to us about the personal benefits that you've seen, and how they've helped you, or how grounding practices have helped you, the personal benefits that you've seen, maybe like a before and after. If you kind of look back to yourself in your darkest time, or 3 years ago or 5 years ago, compared to Devin now, and actually practicing these practices, what's changed in your life?
That's a really good question. So I feel like I used to be the person where the slightest inconvenience, my whole world felt like it was exploding. Like I would be in tears, I'd be having a breakdown at like the slightest inconvenience, something not going my way, or I'm super stressed out about something. Like I would just fall apart. And I would like sit in that for a really long time. I would need to reach out to people and like have other people pull me out of that. And it was a really dependent state. Like I needed a lot of help in order to get out of that or feel like I could deal with it, even if it was like a minor, simple thing that probably wouldn't even take very long to fix. Um, I I just couldn't deal with it. I felt like everything was like falling apart. I couldn't mental breakdown crying like hours. It would take hours out of my day when it could have been like a 5-minute phone call. So I've definitely seen a difference in that for me now. I would say now I'm a very grounded person in general. There's not a lot that can shake me. I might still like get stressed out or, cry over certain situations that are stressful or anxious in that situation. But now I feel like I have the capacity to deal with those things. I can regulate my own emotions. I can come out of it feeling a lot more clear. And it might take one of these practices, it might take going outside or take journaling, but then I'm completely then dependent on myself. And there are times that yes, like it's better to call a friend or have somebody help you with these things if you don't necessarily know what's going on or know what questions to ask, but in general, I feel like I can handle a lot of this stuff way better on my own just by using some of these things, and then over the time of practicing these things. I don't need to physically maybe go outside and ground if I'm feeling stressed or I can't. I could just sit and take a few deep breaths, and that is enough for me to move forward.
And what's the mindset that people are to approach these practices with? And I ask that because, like, it's kind of in the title, right? Like, we call them practices, means that you have to practice them. Means that, if you're starting as a quote unquote beginner today, or you're just starting your journey right today, doesn't mean by like tomorrow you're going to become a Buddha, like, be so calm and, or, you know what I mean? So, like, what do you think, like, the mindset that people have to approach these practices with to, I don't know if manage expectations is like the right phrase per se, but that's kind of like where I want to go with it, because some people might start and expect miracles, this time next week of, Luke and Devin were speaking about grounding. I've done earthing for a week and, my inflammation hasn't cleared up.
Yeah. I mean, especially with physical changes in your body like that, it's going to take some more time to see those changes. Like you said, it's a practice. It's not something that you will ever or can ever be perfect at. So I like to take that mindset of really how I approach everything in life now is that not you don't have to be perfect, and actually, like, you won't be, and you shouldn't be. Like, one of the really great things about earthing specifically is you don't really have to be good at it. All you have to do is go touch the earth. Like, there's no there's no, I don't know, baseline for how good you are at doing that. And a lot of these things, it's not about how good you are or how consistent you are. It's the fact that you take the effort and put that into your priorities to do those things and to take that time and just like knowingly choose to connect. I have this quote that I channeled about grounding, that grounding doesn't change your situation. It's not going to eliminate the 18 projects that you have to do at work or fill in the blank with whatever you have stressed. Grounding does change you. It changes the state of your body. It changes how you approach things and see things. So it'll help you see and tackle your life differently. Grounding takes you out of fight or flight, and it gives you more clarity and peace, even in stressful situations.
I love that because it just reminds people that over time it's them that comes, it's them that changes, right? It's not like the external tools that we're kind of talking about help us in that process and that journey, but actually at the end of the day, it's us that becomes a new, and hopefully with all these different practices, better version of ourselves. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's just like this might the approach that sometimes people have with, again, like, broader than just grounding or earthing, just like with health in general, right? That expecting those miracles overnight. And I think to remind ourselves that actually these are practices, we get better at them over time. And with earthing in particular, as you're saying, like, who's a good earther, right? Like, you just need to go outside and
Yeah.
touch the earth, right? Like, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But I think sometimes people can get um, disappointed if they don't see those immediate results. Like that immediate gratification kind of mindset might sit in. They're not seeing those immediate results, and so they're like, question if this is working. And I think my kind of approach to it is, well, checking with how you feel, but because that's one of the great kind of things that we can do to determine if it is working, but also like to give it time as well. And going back to the consciousness point, I think this is part of the conscious conversation, is that just because we might not see the changes straight away or within 3 months, 6 months, a year, doesn't mean like something isn't happening. And I think that's like the concept of, for me, like that's part of actually like the overall consciousness conversation, right? Like, just because as we're kind of sitting here right now, like there's so many things happening in the world, right? And just from a bigger, higher place as well, but we're just not currently aware of it. So just because you can't see something doesn't mean that something isn't happening. I think if we bring that back to these practices as well, just because you go earthing for a week, 2 weeks, however long period of time, you might not immediately see changes because it depends on where you're starting from. Doesn't mean that something isn't happening. I think that's where consistency and checking in with how we feel can be helpful. And just like keep going with it, especially if we're a beginner to kind of all of this. So, where do you stand on kind of some things that I shared there? Do you have a different opinion, different thoughts? What's your view?
No, I completely agree. I mean, even in my own life, I can think about times that I've changed, and it takes a while. It takes some time to even recognize that change has happened. Like you might be changing drastically, but since you're in it, right? You're in it, just taking one step at a time. You only ever see the teeny tiny step that you just took, instead of like looking back and actually seeing how far you've come. Like that. I, one of those situations of me falling apart and not being able to handle that, like it's been a long time since I've felt like that. And sometimes I forget that. Like it's easy to forget how far you've come and the changes that are actually happening in your life. And like to add too, if grounding or earthing is something that you want to do more often, obviously it is as easy as going outside and putting your feet in the earth. But I also want to mention there are products available for you to do those things. They have grounding mats, they have grounding sheets, they have grounding like wristlets or things that you can do sitting inside your home or going to sleep on them at night. And people have seen a lot of benefits from those. I don't use it personally, so I can't give any recommendations for those things, but those products are available for people who want to make that more of a focus in their life.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that especially if you live in maybe like an area like yourself, I'm not too familiar with like the West Coast, but if people were wanted to set this up as like a daily habit, right? Like, when it is sunny outside, like sure, go outside and actually touch the earth, because I think that's um, the best kind of approach, right? Like, because you're out in nature as well, and so many other benefits. But if it is, a rainy day and the weather's just like shit, right? And you have one of these mats or these other tools, right? Then you can still be consistent with the practice, but you don't necessarily need them to get started. They are also tools that can be added and help what you're doing even better, really. Devin, thank you so much for your time today. What haven't we spoken about that you feel we should have covered when it comes to grounding, but also on the topic of spirituality? I mean, there's probably lots of different things we can touch on that, but um, what do you feel would be most valuable that we haven't spoken about today?
Let's see, I have a couple little things to add. So one of which being I like to push myself even when the weather is not good. So guess what? Even if there is snow on the ground, you can still go outside. You can still put your feet in the earth. It might be a little bit uncomfortable, but if you take baby steps and, push yourself in that way, you would be surprised what is possible for your body and what is comfortable. I've gotten, I think, a lot more comfortable in varying temperature ranges. I would say, especially in Western culture, get really attached to like certain temperature ranges and are only comfortable like in a small temperature range. And just like pushing your boundaries a little bit on that is really helpful. And I've noticed some pretty cool things doing that. Another one of the things is I would like to leave you with a couple of tools, so a couple of practices. There are two different breathwork sequences that I would like to do just for people if they want to follow along or come back and listen to this later in order to do them. So I have two, one of which is called box breathing. So you start with an inhale of 4, hold at the top for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, and then hold at the bottom for a count of 4. And you should be able to do this comfortably for up to 5 minutes. You can continuously do them. It's something that you can do and count on your own. Box breathing is really, really good for reducing stress. So if you're feeling really stressed in a situation, coming back to that 4-4-4 box breathing is really, really helpful. Another one is called tranquil breathing, and it is a inhale for a count of 4, a hold at the top for a count of 7, and then an exhale slowly for a count of 8. And this one is really, really, really good for anxiety. It is called tranquil breathing, so please do not do it while you are driving. It can make you sleepy. It's a good one to do before bed, especially if you're like an anxious, insomnia type person. That one's really good to help calm your nervous system down. It's going to slow your heart rate down quite a bit. So if your heart is racing, that's another good one to do for that.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of points there I'd love to pick up on is definitely agree about the temperature thing, um, which is where I could maybe the cold shower kind of phenomenon has kind of taken off from a bit over the last kind of 3, 4, probably even longer than that, 5+ years, etc. You know, just kind of for those short periods of stress, getting that kind of what's it called, hormesis kind of stress. You know, cold is one of those. Yeah, I've done grounding in the snow before, and I think like the first kind of 6 to 10 seconds, you're like, why am I doing this? Right. Then after that, you know, your body just adapts, you know, and I think that's something that most people, and I'm not perfect at it, you know, there's still some areas in my life or within health or just kind of life in general where I need to kind of push through like that barrier. But it's just that understanding that our body adapts, right? Our body is very good at making adaptations. And when we, you know, make those adaptations, like that's the next step to like, okay, like what else can I now do to grow, right? So, you know, it could be go out grounding, snow on the ground, it was cold. You know, you do it for X amount of time, your body adapts to that, it then becomes a bit more comfortable. Then for me, it's like, okay, it could even be an extra 5 seconds, right? And then your body adapts to that, and you just kind of gradually, you don't need to go from like a minute to 10 minutes straight away, right? But as you mentioned before, those gradual steps that can help our body come into adaptation, which is something that consciously as well, I don't think we recognize. I think we recognize that actually it's always going to be, if I do cold for or grounding for a minute, like at that minute, it's always going to be uncomfortable for that whole minute. And again, like as I'm referring to, no, because our body adapts, which is part of like the growth that we go through. But yeah, I'm kind of waffling there. The second thing I wanted to touch on is the breathing exercises. Thank you for sharing those. I'm familiar with both, and I've heard that actually the 4-7-8 is very good before bed. So if people experience that or experience trouble sleeping, then when I've done that before bed beforehand and tried that, you know, I've kind of yeah, like when I went to sleep a bit more quicker than usual, but you know, it's definitely powerful breathing practice. And as we were doing that, I was doing that with you, and very meditative as well. You know, so another way how I think meditation and even breath work could be used together. On that, would you say? Because this is a I wouldn't say a challenge, but a curiosity, a question I had for a long time was like, oh, you know, what's the difference between breathwork and meditation? Because when I was doing meditation, it kind of felt similar to breathwork because I was like focusing on my breathing. From your experience, like, what's the difference between the two? And obviously, again, they can be intertwined. But yeah, if people wanted to maybe have like a breathwork practice over here and a meditation practice over here, what would you say is the difference between the two?
Yeah, I would definitely. So there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of overlap between the two. You can kind of do a little bit of both and call it both. Like I think that breath work is a form of meditation, but meditation isn't always breath work, if that makes sense. Um,
Makes sense.
I would say that there are more intense breathwork practices that are more meditative than like a normal like box breathing if you're only doing it for a few minutes. Meditation, I would say, is bringing just that mindfulness back. It doesn't necessarily might start with focusing on your breath, but the guided meditations that I do, we let that go. You know, at some point, it's like, okay, let your breathing return back to normal, and then we focus and do other things in that meditative state. So in meditation, there's a couple of things that are important: silence, stillness, and solitude. So somewhere where you can be alone, somewhere where you can sit still, and somewhere where you can just exist in silences. You can do it that way, or like through a guided meditation. Sometimes there's a little bit of music, but it's like there's not talking, there's not active conversation or active things going on. You can have stuff on in the background, but in general, like, it's pretty quiet.
Interesting. Excellent. Devin, thank you so much for your time today. Learned a lot about grounding, so some different practices, reminded myself of some truths to apply or to reapply, should I say, to my own life. And, this is why we have these conversations, right? Which is, I think, to help people to remember. There's like this term I was kind of sharing with people, like, remember what it means to be human, right? And I think that a lot of these grounding practices can get us back to that state, that place. So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your wisdom today. Where can people go if they want to keep in touch?
I am on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I'm sure you'll share my links with everybody in the description box. I have a space open for meditations, healing sessions, and coaching if you feel called to go deeper. I really appreciate you having me on today. I actually have a question for you as well. So what do you think that grounding or these practices, how do you think that can benefit your audience, the people who are focusing consciously about raising their consciousness?
So I think that so it's interesting because I think we shared it before. I'm not sure if we'll talk about it before we went live, that my mind initially goes to, when I hear the word grounding, to earthing. So, and our conversation today has kind of actually reminded me that grounding can be any practice that, I guess, summarizing it would bring us back to like the present moment. So meditation, as we, and many others as we've been exploring. So I think when we're looking at practices like, well, actually, all of them, right? You have the health benefits from a physical, biological level. So, there are studies and many different research papers and that, and I'll link some of them that you provided to our audience on our show notes. So go and check those out. They can have a profound impact on, from us, from a physical, biological sense. But then also from an energy sense, and feeling more peaceful, more calm, and more in tune with who we are. Remembering who we are, and helping us to connect with oneself. I also myself notice a big difference between times where I practice some sort of grounding practice, whether that's, I alluded to Qigong earlier, or meditation, or breathwork. I feel a massive difference in my state, my mental state, my mental capacity, from an energy perspective, from an energy level, how much energy I have in each day. And I think that these are some of the big benefits that you guys, our audience, will experience. And like, who doesn't want more energy, right? Like, who doesn't want a more calmer mind rather than the racing monkey mind and mental chatter that is an innate part, I think, of being human, but doesn't mean that we have to listen to it. There's something I share sometimes, which is like, don't believe every dumb thought that you think, right? Like, our thoughts sometimes can be wild and kind of erratic and kind of out there, but it doesn't mean that you have to believe it. I think these practices can not only remind us of that, but help us become an observer of self, right? So when we have those thoughts, like, monkey mind going off, don't need to believe that, don't need to react to that, and remember our innate being and nature and who we are. So hopefully that answers your question, then. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, of course. Sounds good.
But I will link your links, and people can find you and keep in touch with you in the comments. And once again, thank you for sharing your wisdom here today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This has been a blast.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the podcast with Devin, as we've been exploring grounding and the many different methodologies and practices that are available to us to basically ground and become more of who we truly are through a lot of these different practices. Like, ultimately, grounding for me is a practice of coming back to ourselves, right? That mindfulness, that time of connecting with who we truly are. And I think it's a very important practice, especially in the busy modern world that we live in. I actually discovered a lot of these different practices, whether it's meditation or breath work, through the number one personal growth platform in the world, which is Mindvalley. I've shared Mindvalley a few times on the podcast because I am an avid fan and member and community member of this platform. As I mentioned there, it's the number one personal growth platform in the world, and I highly recommend, if you're serious about your personal growth and want to take your personal growth, personal transformation to the next level, that you check out Mindvalley. Link is in the show notes, so head on over there and check out Mindvalley for yourself. And I look forward to speaking to you, talking to you, seeing you in the next episode of the podcast. Take care.